The election of 1972 and the influence of Richard Nixon helped create the legacy of the 26th Amendment by increasing the youth voting population. In 1971, young men starting at the age of 18 were being drafted into the war and fighting for our country, but weren't allowed to vote for the president or have any representation. This aided the support for the 26th Amendment passed in 1972. 2/3 of American troops volunteered, the rest were selected through the drafts. American men of the draft age 18 to 25 were collected by the Selected Service System. Most of the U.S. soldiers drafted were from poor and working class families. The more wealthy paid their way out of the draft. You could be granted deferments to avoid military service in some cases. About 15 million were granted. In the early 1970s, draft resistance reached its peak. Youth voting rights activists held marches and protests to draw lawmakers' attention to the hypocrisy of drafting young men who lacked the right to vote. In 1969, no fewer than 60 resolutions were sent to Congress to lower the voting age. However, none were passed. The Voting Rights Act of 1965, passed by Congress, contained a provision that lowered the voting age to 18 in federal, state, and local elections to satisfy the people. However, this was proven unconstitutional.
Thousands of demonstrators opposed to the Vietnam War assembled in the nation's capital for a mass protest. For the most part orderly, minor scuffles did occur between the demonstrators and hecklers. A 3-hour parade takes the demonstrators across the Potomac on their way to the Pentagon. The crowd, estimated at about 50,000 persons, was a loose confederation of some 150 groups and included adults, students, even children. It is at the Pentagon where the first test of strength comes. Military police contain the crowd, but clashes soon break out. Federal marshals arrest several who attempt to break through the protective line. Reinforcing the marshals, a second wave of MPs with fixed bayonets in scabbards move into position. Some 400 demonstrators are arrested, 2 soldiers are injured, and tear gas is used. 6 break into a Pentagon side door, but are quickly apprehended in the day-long disturbance.
President Nixon signed the bill to lower the voting age. However, he later declared it unconstitutional. He believed Congress could not enforce it as a statute and that it had to be a constitutional amendment. This made the voting age 21 until 1972 when the amendment was passed. President Nixon signed the bill to lower the voting age. However, he later declared it unconstitutional. He believed Congress could not enforce it as a statute and that it had to be a constitutional amendment. This made the voting age 21 until 1972 when the amendment was passed. Section 1 of the amendment stated that the right of citizens of the United States who are 18 years of age or older to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of age. Section 2, the Congress shall have the power to enforce this article by appropriate legislation. The necessary 3/4 of the state's legislators ratified the 26th Amendment, and President Nixon signed it into law, gaining him a lot of public support.
Well, it's a very great privilege to welcome this very exciting group to the White House on the day that we celebrate our National Independence Day. And it seems to me that it is particularly appropriate that on this same day, we are certifying the 26th Amendment to the Constitution of the United States. That amendment, as you know, provides for the right to vote of all of our young people between 18 and 21. 11 million new voters as a result of this amendment that you now will see certified by the GSA administrator.
The race was McGovern versus Nixon, and McGovern ran an anti-war campaign against Nixon, who was in favor of the war. Nixon emphasized a good economy and his success in foreign affairs, along with his last 4 years in office. New voters were expected to vote for George McGovern because of his anti-war standpoint. However, Nixon lowered the voting age, gaining support with younger voters. Nixon won with a 22.3 margin of victory, almost 18 million more popular votes than McGovern. This was the widest margin in any U.S. election.
Demographics can help predict which party a person will most likely vote for, being affected by race, age, income, and region. However, in this election, young voters predominantly voted for Republican, whereas they were expected to side Democratic. This had a huge impact in the election, along with a raise in voter turnout. In Lanahan 71, it talked about millennial voters and how the new generations to come have the most impact on election polls and turnouts.
In more recent years, such as in the 2008 election, 49% of 18 to 24-year-olds voted for Obama, the second highest youth voter turnout in history, showing the shift back to the Democratic Party as most statistics had predicted.